APA references. This is part of the Writing with APA series, and this presentation is brought to you by the Academic Success Center. So we're going to continue our discussion on APA today. Again, what is APA? It's the American Psychological Association. They've created a manual, some guidelines on how to cite and reference, and some standard procedures that you as a student can apply in your work. We're going to be talking about the 7th edition today, and the APA 7th edition provides a range of guidance on in-text citations, references, formatting, language, and style. So in our APA series, we do cover all 4 of these aspects, and today we're going to focus on references. So last week we learned that citing your sources is important because it allows you to give credit to other people's work. An in-text citation informs your reader that you are using information from an external source, and it directs your reader to the appropriate reference list entry by answering the who and the when. When citing a direct quotation, remember to always include a page or paragraph number from the original source. And then we also spoke about online APA resources that can help you become familiar with in-text citations. So we spoke about in-text citations last, and please go and review that recording if you would like more information. Today we're going to focus on the corresponding part of APA. So there's always the 2 parts to APA, the in-text citations and the reference entry. So today we're going to talk more about the reference entry. So references, they appear or are located at the end of your essay on a separate page. They provide all the information that the reader needs to find the source so that the reader is able to look up the source themselves. And then essentially you should always be having a corresponding reference entry for anything you've cited in text. So today, what are we going to talk about? 3 things. We're going to talk about references list, building and how to build your references in 3 steps, and then where you can go for more information. Okay, references list. What does that look like? Over here, we have a screenshot of sample references, and I want to highlight that there is the heading, references, centered in bold at the beginning of the page. We also then have our different entries listed alphabetically, usually by author's last name, but it could also be by organization name if there's no author associated with the work. So another few things I would like to highlight is that there is double spacing applied in this reference list, and there's a hanging indent. So a hanging indent is that space that occurs after the first line of the entry. So after the author, the line with the author, we have then subsequent lines that are indented. I highly encourage you, if you're unsure on how to do this, just to search online for a quick review or video on how to do it. It's very straightforward, and there are tools that you can use in your Microsoft Word processor that allow you to indent a page. Okay, again, we're going to highlight that only sources that were used in your paper are going to be in your reference list. All right, so let's move now to building your reference. So to build an APA reference, we've provided this 3-step process. Number 1, you're going to determine the type of source. In-text citations are the same for all types of sources. You use the author's last name and year, right? So author, date, style, APA. But references are more complex. So each type of reference requires a slightly different format. Before starting to build a reference, you must figure out what is the type of source of information you're referencing so that you could put the information correctly in your reference entry. Types of sources include things like YouTube, videos, podcasts, books, magazines, journal articles, websites. There's a wide range of source types and they have slightly different formats according to APA for their reference entries. Okay, step number 2. You're going to find an example reference or reference template for that type of source. So how do you know what information to include for reference? And how do you know how to format this? Well, later in this presentation, we'll go over a great website, APA style, and it will provide, this is where you can go to see some example references based on the source type that you're using. Okay, and step number 3, locate the information within the source and then use it to generate your reference entry. So once you know what you're looking for, you're able to pull that information. And we're going to walk through this process in the next few slides. So what is the type of information that you need to include in a reference entry? Well, you will need to most commonly include these 4 elements: the who, the when, the what, and the where. So who is responsible for this work? The authors. If no authors are noted, you could always use the organization or the name of the web page in that place. The when. So when was this work published? The date of publication. If there's no date provided, you can use N.D. which means no date in APA. And the what? What is this work called? The title of the web page or the article or the book or the podcast. And then where? Where can I retrieve this work? This is the location of the source. This could be a URL, the name of the journal, a DOI, the name of the publisher or owner of the website. So really, these are the 4 key things you need to keep in mind when you're looking for information for your reference entry: the who, the when, the what, and the where. So let's go through an example. We're going to go through 2 examples today. And the first one is of a web article. So web articles are a common source of information. They are written by individuals or organization representatives and may or may not be a credible source of information. To assess whether a source is credible, consider who is the author, what is the purpose of the website, and the quality of the content. If you would like more information on how to identify credible sources, I highly recommend the library's Source Evaluation Guide. So here we have an example of a web article from Edutopia. The title or the name of the article is Why Curiosity Enhances Learning. So if we look at the source, our first element that we want to identify is the who. So who is this written by? Who is the author? Well, it's clearly indicated after the title by the word by. It's indicating who wrote this, who was the author of this work. So we already have the one element that we need for our reference entry. The next element that we need to look for is the when, the date. So just under the author, we see a date. This is the publication date for the web article, December 17, 2014. Great. So now we've got 2 of our elements. The third is the what. What is this work called? The title. So if we go back to the beginning of the page, we'll often find the title. And here we have it very much prominently displayed in bold. why curiosity enhances learning. Okay, so we've got 3 out of 4 elements. The last one is our where can we find or retrieve this work? So we have 2 indications of where. We have the name of the website. That is a way that people could find this web article. And we've also got the URL, which would take people directly to the location of this article online. So 2 elements for the source of the where can I find this. Now, let's look at how we would put this together. So we're going to put together the who, the when, the what, and the where. And I want to highlight that the order in which we discovered this information is also the order for the format. So we begin with the author element in red. Danger, we use the last name of the author followed by their initial or their first name. If they had subsequent names, you could do subsequent initials. So if they had a middle name, 1, 2, you could always add those initials over there. So we've got the author element. This is followed by the date. Always begins with the year. And if we have any subsequent date information, such as month and day, we can add that after the year. And then followed by, in yellow, the title element, why curiosity enhances learning. Notice that we are using a specific case for the title. So we're using sentence case. We're not using the same capitalization that is in the original text, right? In the original text, why curiosity enhances learning, each word is capitalized. Whereas APA wants us to use sentence case, so we are using that for the title sentence case. We've also used italics to indicate the title of the piece. Now this is followed in blue by our source element. So where can someone go to find this work? And we've included the website name, Edutopia, and the URL link. So this is a reference example for a web article, and you could follow the same example as a template for any web article that you may need to cite. Always know that you first start with the author element, followed by the date, followed by the title, and then the source element. Great. Now let's look at the next example, which is of a peer-reviewed journal article. Peer-reviewed articles, also called scholarly or refereed articles, are a key information source for your college papers and projects. These articles go through a peer review process. This means scholarly peers provide feedback on the validity and merit of the work and whether it should be published. So that's the process that this work goes through, that these authors go through to get their work published. And this ensures that it is a reliable source of information on a topic or discipline. So these articles are published in journals, and often these journals can be found in the library's online database by using the OneSearch tool. So let's look at an example of where to find reference information for a journal article. Again, we're going to follow the same question of what information do we need to look for in this reference entry. So again, we're going to start off with the who. So we have very clearly a series of who, of authors, under the title of this article. So we've got Gail Putnam, James Elander, Joan Lusher, Pauline Fox, and Nicola Payne. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 authors for this piece. Next, we're going to look for the date, and that is located at the top of the page, right under our journal details. We have the publication date listed after the volume number. So 2009. We also have a publication date under the authors. So it says published online, 18th of March, 2009. I just want to let you know to use that publication online date with caution, because a publication online date might differ from a publication date. So sometimes an article will be released online ahead of the journal being published, or might be released online after the journal has been published. So always double check if those the publication date in the actual journal details, it aligns with any other date that you see on the web page or on the journal page. Great. So our next element is title, so the what. And we have that again very clearly in bold at the beginning of the page. What is this work called? Student beliefs and attitudes about authorial identity in academic writing. Okay, so very clearly this is the what is this work called? And then our last element is the where. Where can I retrieve this work? And for a journal article, there's quite a few elements or parts to this. There are a few parts to this greater element. So over here, we have a journal name, Studies in Higher Education. We have a page range. So within this journal, so within Studies in Higher Education, volume 34, we can find this article on pages 153 to 170. And then in addition to that, we also have a DOI link. So a DOI is a digital object identifier and is a permanent link to this source. So this is commonly provided in journal articles, especially those published recently. So we have our 4 elements: the who, the what, the who, the when, the what, and the where. Again, we're going to take these parts of the source and put it together in a reference list entry. So we have in red our authors. So you see we've listed them again by last author, the first author's last name, followed by their initial, second author, their last name and their initial, and following the same order that was presented in the source. So we're not changing that order. There's a reason for that order, and we are replicating that in our reference list entry. We then have a date, and we have just 2009. We then have the title, Student Beliefs and Attitudes about Authorial Identity in Academic Writing, in yellow. Notice that the title is in sentence case again, but it is not italicized. So now we move to the source element, and the beginning of the source element, so the name of the journal and the volume number, are italicized. So those elements within this reference entry for journal article are italicized. So this is where it's really helpful to have a reference template example for your source type, so that you can understand these slight differences of what should be italicized and what shouldn't be italicized, depending on the source type. Okay, so here we have the name of the journal, Studies in Higher Education, the volume number, and then in parentheses, we have the issue number, which was number 2. So we had that coming just after the year. We had the issue number. So we include that in our source element. And then followed by our issue is our page range, 153 to 170. And then lastly is our DOI. So that is our link that we put. Notice that the DOI is in a HTTPS form, and that's how it should look in our reference entry or journal article. Great. So this is what it looks like put all together. We have our web article in the first reference list entry, and then we have our journal article in the second reference entry. What differences do we notice? Well, we had the same sequence of information, of elements, right? We always started with the who, moved on to the when, the what, and the where. So regardless of the source type, we followed that same sequence. But there were some differences. In the source element or the journal article, we had a lot more elements or parts to the element that we added, such as the journal name, the volume, and the issue, and the page range, which we didn't do in the web article because we didn't have that. We didn't have a need to do so. We didn't have that information. And then there was also the difference with a DOI versus a URL. And also, lastly, the difference between what was italicized. So in the web article, the title of the web article was italicized, whereas in the journal article, the journal name, not the article name, was italicized. Okay, and in this last slide, we show an example of what this would look like in an actual references list. Notice that while we were in the previous example had the web article first, just based on our sequence that we were doing it. We first did a web article, then an example of a reference from a journal article. In this one, we have it listed alphabetically, right? Which is what is required for APA. So we have it listed alphabetically with first the journal article based on Pittem coming before Stenger, the author of the web article. Okay, so where can you go to find more information? And before we dive straight into that, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that you may be using a citation or reference generator. Let's talk about that. So yes, you can use a citation or reference generator, but I also want you to keep in mind that it is a tool. So the citations and references it produces will only be as accurate as the information you input or that it's able to identify. Some citation and reference generators may also use different editions of APA. So if you are using a citation and reference generator, you want to make sure that it is using 7th edition of APA. Regardless of whether you're using a citation generator or not, it is still your responsibility to double check your work and ensure that the content and formatting is correct. So it's really important to have a basic understanding of how to create a reference list entry or in-text citation so that this can help you to double check your work. So where can you go for more information? Well, number one resource that we always share with students is the APA Style website. The helpful resource gives you the basic principles, but also some great templates. Where would you go? Well, you could go to the references. Once you go to the web page, you click on Style and Grammar Guidelines and the drop-down menu, and then click on References. Once you go to the References page, we highly recommend going to Reference Examples. And across the reference examples, there's a range of different source types, and then some templates on what this would look like. So over here, we have an example of a journal article. The APA reference page gives us an example of this journal article, reference entry, as well as an in-text citation. What would the in-text citation look like for this reference entry? So this is really helpful for double checking your punctuation, your italics, your sentence case, and making sure that your elements are in the right sequence and you haven't missed or forgotten an element. Again, If there's some missing reference information, APA, the style website provides some guidance on this. And there's this great resources table. If an author is missing, they provide guidance on what this looks like. If there's a date missing, they'll provide guidance on what to do. So a really useful place to go if you are unsure what to do if there's missing reference information. So in summary today, references are listed alphabetically in a reference list at the end of your written assignment. Before building your reference, you're going to take these 3 steps. Number 1, determine the type of the source. 2, find an example reference for that source type. Number 3, locate information from your source and input information to complete the reference. And then really the things that you're going to be looking for in the source is the who, the when, the what, and the where. And really becoming familiar with online APA resources that will help you navigate the unique reference requirements for different source types. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.